People spend years believing they are too sensitive because they hear the same sentence over and over again. It usually starts early. A child cries easily, notices tension in the room, asks why someone looks sad, or becomes overwhelmed by loud voices. Instead of asking what the child is noticing, people begin labeling the child. You're too emotional. You're overreacting. You're making a big deal out of nothing. Eventually, those words stop sounding like opinions and start sounding like identity. The child grows into an adult who apologizes for having feelings before expressing them. They hesitate before speaking honestly because somewhere deep inside they have accepted a quiet assumption. Maybe something is wrong with the way I experience the world. But what if that assumption is backwards? What if sensitivity is not the problem? What if the real problem is that some people have spent years carrying emotional weight that was never supposed to be theirs? There is an important distinction that psychology often makes between emotional sensitivity and emotional burden. Sensitivity is your ability to notice information. Burden is what happens when you begin carrying responsibility for information that does not belong to you. Those two experiences feel similar from the inside, but they produce very different lives. Imagine walking into a room where nobody has spoken yet. Most people simply notice the furniture, the lighting, and the people present. Someone who is highly emotionally aware notices something else. One person is avoiding eye contact. Another seems distracted. Someone forces a smile that disappears almost immediately. There is tension between two people standing across the room. Nothing has been said. Yet the atmosphere already communicates something. Some individuals naturally detect these subtle patterns more quickly than others. That ability is not magical. The human brain is constantly processing facial expressions, posture, voice, breathing patterns, movement, and countless other signals below conscious awareness. Some nervous systems simply become exceptionally practiced at noticing them. The question is why? Part of the answer lies in experience. Children who grow up in emotionally unpredictable environments often become outstanding observers. If a parent's mood changes without warning, the child learns to recognize the smallest signals: a sigh, a different tone of voice, a slower walk down the hallway, the sound of keys being placed on the table. To another child, these details mean nothing. To the child living with unpredictability, they become survival information. The brain begins building extraordinary pattern recognition. Years later, people describe that person as an empath. Sometimes they are also carrying the nervous system of someone who spent years learning that emotional awareness prevented danger. Those two things can exist together. This is where misunderstanding begins. Many emotionally aware people believe they are absorbing everyone else's emotions. Sometimes what they are actually absorbing is responsibility. There is a massive psychological difference. Feeling compassion when someone is hurting is healthy. Feeling personally responsible for fixing every hurt person you encounter eventually becomes exhausting. One creates connection. The other creates chronic emotional overload. Notice how many emotionally sensitive people automatically ask themselves questions that were never theirs to answer. Are they upset because of me? Did I say something wrong? How can I make them feel better? What should I do to keep everyone happy? These questions appear so quickly that they feel automatic. Over time, they become habits. Eventually, they become identity. The person starts believing they exist primarily to maintain emotional balance around other people. That is an impossible job. Human emotions constantly change. No individual can successfully regulate everyone else forever. Yet many spend decades trying. One fascinating observation from psychology is that highly emotionally attuned people often confuse understanding with obligation. Understanding someone's pain does not automatically mean you are responsible for removing it. Understanding someone's anger does not require accepting mistreatment. Understanding someone's trauma does not mean sacrificing your own well-being. Empathy explains behavior. It does not excuse behavior. Many people struggle with this distinction because they have been rewarded throughout life for taking emotional responsibility beyond what is healthy. People praise them. You always know exactly what to say. You're such a good listener. I don't know what I'd do without you. Those compliments feel wonderful, but hidden inside them is a dangerous possibility. The person begins receiving value primarily through emotional labor. Being needed starts feeling safer than simply being loved. Eventually, they notice something strange. Almost every conversation becomes about someone else's problems. Friends call during emergencies. Family members depend on them. Coworkers unload stress onto them. Partners expect endless understanding. Everyone leaves feeling lighter. They leave feeling heavier. Not because listening is bad, because nobody noticed they were carrying everyone's emotional luggage home. This emotional accumulation rarely happens overnight. It happens one interaction at a time, one favor, one difficult conversation, one sacrifice, one postponed boundary, one ignored feeling. Months become years. Eventually, the nervous system stops distinguishing between personal emotions and borrowed emotions. Someone nearby becomes anxious. You suddenly feel anxious. Someone becomes angry. Your body tightens immediately. Someone is disappointed. You spend the rest of the day trying to solve a problem that was never yours. This experience feels deeply personal because the nervous system responds before conscious thought. People sometimes believe this proves they are too sensitive. It may actually prove they have spent years practicing emotional monitoring without practicing emotional separation. Those are different skills. Monitoring notices emotion. Separation recognizes ownership. Without separation, every feeling entering the room feels like an assignment. Psychologists sometimes describe a concept known as emotional contagion. Human beings naturally influence one another's emotional states. Spend enough time around laughter, and your mood often improves. Spend enough time around chronic negativity, and your body begins reflecting that tension. This is completely normal. The challenge appears when emotional contagion becomes emotional identification. Instead of noticing another person's feelings, you begin experiencing them as your responsibility. Imagine standing next to someone carrying a heavy backpack. Empathy notices their struggle. Over-identification quietly picks up the backpack. Eventually, you forget which weight belongs to whom. Many emotionally aware individuals become extraordinarily skilled at predicting people's needs before those needs are expressed. They refill drinks before anyone asks. They apologize first. They smooth over disagreements. They remember birthdays. They notice discomfort instantly. These behaviors often receive admiration, but few people ask an important question. What happens when the caretaker needs care? Many do not know. Not because others refuse, because asking feels unfamiliar. They have become experts at giving, while remaining beginners at receiving. Receiving creates vulnerability. Giving creates control. If I am helping you, I understand my role. If I need your help, uncertainty appears. Will you disappoint me? Will I become a burden? Will you leave? Those questions rarely exist consciously. The nervous system simply feels uncomfortable, so they continue giving. There is another reason emotionally aware people become overwhelmed. They often mistake boundaries for rejection. Suppose someone asks for another favor. Healthy boundaries might sound like this. I'd love to help, but I can't today. Simple, respectful, clear. To someone who has spent years carrying everyone else's emotional weight, saying those words can feel physically uncomfortable. Their body predicts guilt before anyone responds. They imagine disappointment, conflict, rejection, criticism. So instead they agree. Then resentment quietly grows. Resentment is fascinating because it often signals ignored boundaries. The emotion itself is not the enemy. It functions like information. It asks a question. Where did you abandon yourself to keep someone else comfortable? Highly compassionate people frequently ignore this message. They believe resentment means they should become even kinder. Sometimes it means they should become clearer. There is tremendous psychological freedom in realizing compassion and boundaries. Strengthen one another rather than compete. Without boundaries, compassion becomes exhaustion. Without compassion, boundaries become isolation. Healthy relationships require both. Another misconception surrounds intuition. Many emotionally aware people describe having strong intuition about people. Sometimes they accurately sense dishonesty before evidence appears. They notice inconsistencies. Promises sound different from behavior. Stories change. Energy shifts. People assume intuition is mysterious. Often it is accelerated pattern recognition. The brain has quietly collected thousands of observations. Voice patterns, facial tension, eye movement, timing, language, behavior. The conscious mind cannot explain every calculation, but the nervous system reaches a conclusion. This process feels like instinct. Experience sharpens perception. Yet perception has limitations. Someone who has experienced repeated betrayal may detect danger accurately. They may also detect danger where none exists. Both possibilities deserve consideration. This is why emotional awareness requires curiosity rather than certainty. Instead of saying, I know exactly what this means, a healthier question becomes, what evidence supports this feeling? Notice the difference. One assumes, the other investigates. Curiosity protects empathy from becoming projection. Another hidden burden appears inside people-pleasing. Many assume people-pleasing comes from kindness, Sometimes kindness plays a role. Often fear plays the larger role. Fear of disappointing, fear of conflict, fear of abandonment, fear of being misunderstood. People-pleasing attempts to prevent uncomfortable emotions before they happen. Ironically, it often creates exactly those emotions later. The individual becomes exhausted, invisible, unappreciated, not because others intended harm, because no one realized invisible sacrifices were happening. Unspoken expectations create silent disappointments. One subtle psychological shift changes everything. Instead of asking, "What does everyone else need?" add one more question. "What do I need?" Simple. Not selfish. Balanced. Many emotionally burdened individuals cannot answer immediately. Years of focusing outward have weakened awareness inward. They know everyone else's emotional weather. They have forgotten how to check their own. Imagine spending years as the emotional thermometer for every room you enter. Eventually you stop asking whether your own internal temperature is comfortable. Your attention always points outward. Healing often begins by reversing that direction, not abandoning empathy. Expanding it. Including yourself inside the circle of compassion. That sounds obvious. For many people, it feels revolutionary, because somewhere along the way, they accepted an unspoken rule. Everyone else's feelings matter more than mine. That belief quietly shapes relationships, careers, friendships, and identity. It creates remarkable caretakers. It also creates invisible loneliness. One of the saddest experiences emotionally burdened people describe is feeling deeply understood by almost no one. They understand everyone. Very few understand them. Not because others refuse, because they rarely reveal enough to be understood. They become listeners instead of speakers. Observers instead of participants. Support systems instead of human beings with needs. The role becomes so familiar, they forget it is only one role. Not their entire identity. There comes a moment in many healing journeys where an emotionally aware person recognizes something uncomfortable. Some relationships existed primarily because they overfunctioned emotionally. The constant advice, the constant reassurance, the constant availability, the constant rescue. When those patterns change, some relationships change too. That realization hurts, but it also reveals something important. Healthy relationships survive healthy boundaries. Unhealthy dynamics often depend upon their absence. Many people fear boundaries because they think boundaries push people away. Healthy boundaries do something different. They reveal who respects your humanity and who only respected your usefulness. That distinction matters, because usefulness and love are not synonyms. Someone can appreciate what you do without appreciating who you are. Emotionally burdened individuals often confuse those experiences because they have spent years earning connection through service. Imagine never needing to earn your right to rest. Never needing to earn kindness, never needing to earn understanding, simply existing without carrying everyone's emotional survival. For some people, that idea feels almost impossible, not because they reject it, because they have never experienced it consistently enough to believe it. The nervous system trusts repetition. If your history repeatedly taught you that love required performance, then unconditional care initially feels unfamiliar. Not wrong, just unfamiliar. That distinction matters because unfamiliar experiences often trigger anxiety, even when they are healthy. The body asks, "What is happening?" The answer is simple. You are experiencing a relationship that operates under different rules than the ones your nervous system memorized years ago. New rules require new evidence, consistent evidence, repeated evidence, safe evidence. Over time, something remarkable begins happening. You still notice people's emotions. You still care deeply. You still offer compassion, but you stop confusing compassion with responsibility. You stop measuring your worth by how much pain you can carry. You begin recognizing a truth that was hidden beneath years of emotional labor. Sensitivity was never the enemy. The real weight came from believing every emotion you encountered belonged on your shoulders. And once that belief begins to loosen, something inside the nervous system changes. The room still has emotional weather, but for the first time, you realize you are allowed to walk through the storm without becoming responsible for the rain. There is a question that almost nobody asks emotionally overwhelmed people. Not, "How are you doing?" Not, "Are you okay?" But something much more revealing. When was the last time you felt completely responsible for only your own emotions? For many people, the answer is difficult to find. They can remember managing their partner's stress, helping their parents through difficult seasons, keeping peace between friends, protecting younger siblings, supporting coworkers, being the person everyone leaned on. But remembering a season where their emotional energy belonged primarily to themselves feels strangely unfamiliar. That is how emotional burden becomes invisible. It becomes normal. The nervous system adapts to carrying weight so gradually that it stops recognizing the weight altogether. Imagine wearing a backpack every day. At first, it feels heavy. Weeks later, your muscles adjust. Months later, you forget you're wearing it. Someone else points to the backpack and says, "That looks exhausting." Your first response is often confusion. What backpack? Psychological burdens often work exactly the same way. The mind normalizes whatever it repeats. This explains why emotionally burdened people often underestimate their own exhaustion. Someone asks how they're doing. They compare themselves to the worst moments they've survived. "I'm fine. I'm managing." It could be worse. Objectively, they're running on empty. Subjectively, they're functioning better than they were years ago. The comparison point is survival, not health. That difference matters because surviving and thriving produce very different nervous systems. Another interesting pattern emerges around silence. Most people think emotionally aware individuals enjoy quiet because they're reflective. Sometimes that's true, but many people who carry emotional burdens become uncomfortable with silence for another reason. Silence removes distraction. Distraction has been protecting them for years. When conversations stop, when work ends, when notifications disappear, when the television turns off, something else becomes audible. Their own thoughts, their own grief, their own unmet needs, the emotions they've postponed while taking care of everyone else. This is why some people stay constantly busy, not because they love productivity, because busyness postpones emotional awareness. There is always another email, another project, another responsibility, another person to help. As long as movement continues, self-reflection waits. Eventually the body interrupts. Burnout is often the nervous system saying what the mind refused to acknowledge. You cannot carry this forever. Burnout rarely appears overnight. It whispers before it shouts. You become irritated more easily. You stop enjoying things that once mattered. Your patience shortens. Sleep no longer restores you. Small tasks feel unusually difficult. Conversations become draining instead of energizing. You begin withdrawing without fully understanding why. Many emotionally burdened people interpret these signs incorrectly. They assume they need to try harder, become stronger, work more efficiently, help more people. Ironically, the solution often points in the opposite direction. Less carrying, not more. One of the greatest misconceptions surrounding compassion is the belief that caring more always produces better outcomes. Psychology suggests something different. Compassion without recovery eventually becomes depletion. Think about emergency responders, doctors, therapists, nurses, crisis counselors. Many entered their professions because they genuinely cared about people. Yet every one of those professions also emphasizes recovery, rest, supervision, boundaries, time away, because emotional systems require maintenance. The same principle applies to everyday life. If your identity revolves around helping everyone else while ignoring your own emotional recovery, eventually your compassion begins operating on borrowed energy. Borrowed energy always runs out. Another fascinating phenomenon appears in conversations. Emotionally burdened individuals often remember tiny details about other people's lives. A birthday mentioned 6 months ago, a stressful appointment, a favorite meal, an important anniversary. They remember because paying attention became part of how they created connection. Then something unexpected happens. Their own important moments pass unnoticed. Not because people don't care, because they quietly trained everyone to focus in one direction, outward, toward everyone else. This creates an invisible imbalance. The caretaker knows everyone. Very few people know the caretaker. There is also an interesting relationship between emotional burden and decision-making. People carrying everyone else's emotions often struggle with surprisingly simple personal choices. Where do you want to eat? What movie do you want to watch? What do you actually want this weekend? These questions seem easy, yet many hesitate. Why? Because they have spent years asking different questions. What does everyone else want? What will make everyone comfortable? What creates the least conflict? Personal preference slowly weakens when it is consistently placed behind collective content. Eventually, someone asks what you want. Your first instinct becomes, I don't mind. I'm okay with anything. Whatever everyone else wants. That answer sounds generous. Repeated often enough, it becomes identity. When one day someone says, no, what do you want? Silence follows. Not because there are no preferences, because the pathway leading toward them has not been used in a very long time. Healing sometimes begins with surprisingly small decisions. Choosing the restaurant. Choosing the vacation. Choosing where to sit. Choosing when to leave. Choosing rest without explanation. Each small choice reminds the nervous system that your needs also deserve consideration. Another hidden cost of emotional burden appears in conflict. Highly compassionate people often fear conflict far more than necessary. Not because disagreement itself is frightening, because earlier experiences taught them conflict threatened connection. Perhaps arguments ended with withdrawal. Perhaps affection disappeared. Perhaps criticism lasted for days. The nervous system remembers. Years later, a simple disagreement with a healthy person produces anxiety completely, disproportionate to the actual situation. The body reacts to history, not merely the present moment. Healthy relationships reveal something surprising. Conflict does not automatically destroy connection. Respectful disagreement strengthens trust. Repair strengthens relationships. Honest conversations create closeness. These experiences slowly rewrite expectations. The nervous system begins learning a completely different rule. I can disagree and still belong. That lesson changes lives. There is another misconception worth examining. Many people believe emotionally aware individuals are naturally calm. Look more closely. Often they are constantly regulating themselves. Those are not the same thing. Calmness requires little effort. Self-regulation requires continuous effort. Someone smiles, listens patiently, speaks gently, appears completely composed. Inside, they may be monitoring dozens of emotional variables. Don't interrupt. Stay patient. Notice their reaction. Keep the peace. Don't make things worse. The outside appears effortless. The inside is working incredibly hard. Eventually, constant regulation becomes tiring, not because emotional intelligence is exhausting, because emotional vigilance never turns off. One remarkable thing happens when emotionally burdened people finally experience consistently safe relationships. At first, they often become more emotional, not less. This surprises everyone, especially them. They think, I thought healing would make me cry less. Sometimes healing allows you to cry more because your nervous system finally believes it is safe enough to release emotions that were postponed for years. Suppressed emotions do not disappear. They wait. Safety gives them permission to move. This is why many people unexpectedly grieve after life improves. They are not grieving because life became worse. They are grieving because survival finally loosened its grip enough to make feeling possible. Another powerful shift occurs when emotionally aware people stop assuming they must explain every boundary. Notice how often emotionally burdened individuals justify perfectly reasonable decisions. I'm sorry, but I'm really tired. I wish I could help, but I've just been so busy lately. I hate saying no. Explanation after explanation after explanation. Underneath those explanations often lives a deeper belief. My needs require permission. Healthy boundaries gradually teach a different lesson. Your limits are information, not negotiations. You can care deeply about someone and still say no. You can love someone and refuse unhealthy behavior. You can understand someone's pain without becoming responsible for fixing it. Those ideas sound obvious intellectually. Living them consistently requires retraining years of conditioning. Conditioning always resists change at first. That resistance is normal. Every new boundary feels awkward before it feels natural. Every healthy relationship initially feels unfamiliar after unhealthy patterns. Every act of self-respect challenges an old belief that said your worth depended upon self-sacrifice. One question quietly changes everything. Instead of asking, how much more can I carry? Ask, what was actually mine to carry in the first place? That single question separates compassion from obligation, kindness from self-erasure, empathy from emotional ownership. Many people discover something astonishing. Half the weight they thought belonged to them never did. Someone else's disappointment, someone else's expectations, someone else's choices, someone else's healing, someone else's happiness. These experiences deserve compassion. They do not require ownership. Ownership changes posture. Compassion stands beside someone. Ownership attempts to become them. No human nervous system was designed to permanently absorb the emotional lives of dozens of people. Eventually, something has to give. Sometimes it's energy. Sometimes it's health. Sometimes it's joy. Sometimes it's identity. Identity is perhaps the greatest hidden cost. Spend enough years carrying everyone else's emotional experience, and eventually, someone asks, who are you? Not what you do. Not who you help. Not who depends on you. Who are you? Many emotionally burdened people pause. They can describe everyone else's personalities in remarkable detail. Their own feels strangely undefined. Because they became mirrors. Mirrors reflect everyone else. Mirrors rarely examine themselves. Healing slowly changes that. The mirror remains. You still notice. You still care. You still understand. But something new appears alongside empathy. A clear sense of self. You begin recognizing where another person's emotions end and your own begin. You stop apologizing for needing rest. You stop believing love must always cost exhaustion. You stop measuring your value by how indispensable you are. And perhaps most importantly, you stop confusing emotional pain with emotional responsibility. Someone can be hurting without it becoming your job to carry their life. Someone can be disappointed without you becoming a disappointment. Someone can misunderstand you without your identity changing. Someone can struggle while you remain compassionate without abandoning yourself. That realization does not make your heart smaller. It makes your compassion sustainable. Because the goal was never to stop caring. The goal was to stop disappearing inside everyone else's story. The most emotionally healthy people are not those who feel the least. They are the ones who have learned one of the hardest psychological skills a human being can develop. To keep an open heart without carrying every weight they encounter. To listen deeply without losing themselves. To offer kindness without abandoning their own needs. To remain compassionate without becoming consumed. And somewhere along that journey, many people discover something they should have been told years ago. They were never broken because they felt deeply. They were exhausted because they believed that every feeling they noticed was another burden they had to carry.